and launch of my epitaph, a book of poems authored by Jagdeep Singh. I would like to commence the session by requesting Rajesh Patel to present a small note of flower to our author. And may I also request Tusharika to welcome Dr. Puri with similar gift. Well, let us start by, I'll start briefly by introducing Jagdeep Singh, who is popularly known as Jax amongst his friends. Quiet please at the back. Jax is a public relations practitioner and runs his own PR firm in Jaipur. For over 2 decades, he was head of PR at RICO in the Rajasthan government. He is a postgraduate in English and history and also had a stint of journalism. He is also taught at St. Xavier's School, my alma mater also. He has published his poems in a number of poetry journals and magazines as well as online. You will understand that the launch of his book, My Epitaph, could not be held earlier owing to the COVID lockdowns. The first launch was held last month at Hotel Clarks, and the book received wide acclaim from literary circles. Reviews of his poems have been published by many journals and newspapers as well. We therefore decided to immediately host a repeat event here at the club. In fact, Jax is already working on his second collection for publication soon, and this time around the publishers are giving him, or they are after him to publish the second edition soon, having received such an excellent response for the first book, which will be discussed in further detail today. We are indeed honored to have with us Dr. Cheena Puri, Professor of English. She has been teaching both the language as well as English literature for almost 2 decades. She has worked as OSD in the Rajasthan State Higher Education Council, wherein she undertook innovative projects for excellence in higher education studies in our state. Dr. Puri's doctorate thesis is on the British writer and moral philosopher Iris Murdoch, where she examines Murdoch's response to the crisis of character, both in fiction and life, from a philosophical, moral and literary perspective. Her other interests include studying the works of writers belonging to the Indian diaspora, as well as other Indian literature in English. She has to her credit many literary articles published in national and international journals, along with a collection of poems called Some Reflections of Life. Dr. Puri will be in conversation with the author and help us get a better understanding and perhaps a deeper appreciation of the book, My Epitaph, published by Jax. Jax will also share with us his ideas, thoughts and desires which emanated in his mind and which led him to strive and work hard to pen these gems published in his book of poems. Jax presented some of us with a copy of this book, which has been published by Writers Workshop, a very distinguished old publishing house from Kolkata, which takes great pride in hand-binding individual books in hand-woven cloth. The book is a collector's delight, and I was one of the earlier ones to be presented a copy as soon as it was published. After a cursory glance, I realized that this book is like an expensive single malt. It must be savored slowly, one sip at a time. I hope you are hearing Party. And like a peck of single malt, each poem should be allowed to permeate the mind and take you into a world of thoughts and emotions which each one of us must experience on a fairly individual basis in this journey of life. May I now request Dr. Puri to commence her talk and lead the conversation with Jags. We will conclude with questions and answers, but informal discussions with the author will continue over a cup of tea. Those of you who do not have a copy may kindly obtain one at the desk at the back. So, Jags, on to you. Thank you.
Just before we begin the conversation, may I please request if we can have one more mic?
Yeah.
So that, fine. And if 2 bottles of mineral water can be put on the table, please. Someone can just coordinate at the back.
Yeah, I'll do that. Don't worry.
Before I hand over to China, who also happens to be the wife of an ex-student of mine from 1984 batch in Xavier's, Vivek Mitani, doctor of the STMH Urology Department. I would just like to thank some people. Firstly, we had the moment the book came out, the second lockdown happened, and then it came out in January 21, but people were still not geared up to meet, and also it kept getting postponed. And finally, when we were planning with this, sometime in April, when the second wave hit so badly, so I presented a copy to some few people. The publishers had sent to some reviewers and poetry journals, from where we got a huge appreciation, critical appreciation for this poetry. Reviews are already continually coming out, and even the Journal of Sahitya Academy, monthly Journal of Sahitya Academy of Indian Literature, have agreed to do a review on this book. But before I begin, I would like to thank Ajay Singha Saab and my daughter Tusharika for taking the initiative of having a second session of this book event. And the reason was that when we had it in class, some people could not make it and some we forgot to invite. So there were some people who were offended also. So we, to bring about a second, we'll have another session. So that was the thing. And I would also like to thank the Ashok Club management and the royal family of Jaipur. I work for them. They very kindly provide us the premises and any other facility. The great patrons of literature, ladies and gentlemen. I would also like to hear Tabina is there, and Himanshu could not make it because he's busy in a play. Whenever Tabina and Himanshu would see my poems on the social media or in a poetry portal, they would keep telling me, why don't you send your poetry for publication? And I would say, yeah, I was too lazy to. I've lost a lot of my poems because to scribble and they get lost. I remember a long time ago, my mother, used to have thick telephone directories. She would open a directory and find a poem in it. And she would say, what is this? Why don't you keep them in one place? Why don't you compile them? So it would go on and on. But I would acknowledge Tabina and Himanshu, she's there. I would also like to thank Tulika Haldar. Some of you might know her. She was a journalist with Jaipur Times in Times of India for many years. She's a content editor now based in Mumbai. And in 2017, she started an online poetry portal called A Voice from Far Away. And she kept motivating me. The Jags, I've seen some of your earlier poems on the Facebook and other social media. So I think you should start not only sharing those old poems with this portal, but you should start writing new poetry. So when she kept motivating me, I finally got motivated and started. And some of these new poems, I think like Hamlet, like Hemingway, like On the Death of Sylvia Plath, I think they're much more matured stuff than what I was writing earlier. And they've got a lot of critical appreciation. And lastly, I would just like to say, Professor Hassan Saab is there, who has also had his poem published with Writers' Workshop. Now, for Indian poets writing in English, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, there is the Writers' Workshop is the ultimate. It was founded in 1958 by Professor P. Lal, who was head of the English department, Xavier's, and a very eminent poet himself. He devoted the last 10 years of his life transcreating, he didn't use the word translate, transcreating the what is that, Mahabharata. So, and his son, Professor Anand Dalal, who is also a professor of English, and his daughter Shubh Tara Lal. But this publishing house is not easy to deal with. They don't talk to you on the phone, you can't meet them in their office. I tried meeting them in Calcutta, but they said no. All you can do is send your poems on the mail as per the submission guidelines given in their website and wait for a month, exact month. And on 31st, and if you lobby for your poems, you had it. They will immediately send it back. And so, exactly on the 31st day, you will hear from them, yes or no. They might ask you for some more poems. For me, it was like, okay for all poems. A friend of mine just saying they've asked him to send more poems. They've asked him to revise some poems. But luckily for me, it was straight away. But they take a lot of time. And you've seen, this is, it's a labor of love. They use Bengal, handloom from there. And the binding itself takes a lot of time, printing takes a lot of time. So once you've given it for submission, for publication, once it's accepted, 1 year is easily gone. It will take at least a year's time. But the satisfaction for the writer is that it has been accepted by the Writers' Workshop, which is a huge thing. Having said that, I would now like to hand over to China. China was there in the first session and she asked some very probing questions.
Good evening. Good evening. So, a very warm good evening to all. I hope I'm audible at that. So, before we commence this much awaited book interaction, I wish to say some of the things you've already said. That I met Jags, I'll call you Jags.
Yeah, sure.
Almost a month back at class, during the first book release of my epitaph, and I was also among the audience. And this is my second meeting with him. However, the fact is that I have known him since last 22 years because one of his students, sitting right here, happens to be my husband and who has always been mentioning about you, especially when remembering his childhood days and his school memories. So one of the memories when he was in class 8 and he was the English teacher, to bring alive that moment from the past. Imagine this classroom of 8th standard boys when the teacher has not entered. Obviously, it will be full of noise and commotion. So then he entered and still the noise going on. So he held one of the boys by his collar and shaking him and said, I want no nonsense in my class. So that boy is sitting here and is my husband. So his memory of that time I share is of a strict teacher, a disciplinarian who had a doll-like look and who taught British English in that husky, resonating voice which I think still reverberates in his mind. And I gather that you are a very popular teacher and I think a lot of Xaverites must be here. So can we have a big round of applause for this wonderful teacher? Thank you all. So, talking about going back in time, Jax, I was, when I went through the anthology, I wanted to know that when did you first have this urge to pen down your feelings and thoughts in the form of poems? And also, when I went through the entire anthology, and believe me, I had to read and reread it because the poems are so intense that they elicit deep introspection. And I found that there is a kind of a pattern, a life's journey of the persona, because you begin with my epitaph, which immediately reminds you of elegy written in the country churchyard, which closes with the epitaph, so which is symbolic of an ending. And then you close your anthology with the Charcoal Crematorium, where you imagine yourself being cremated, so it's sort of a closure again. And then in between your poetry flows, capturing these snapshots of life's topsy-turvies, of ironies, figuring out what life is all about. So what do you have to say about your earliest written poems in this anthology and also about this life's journey which I could perceive?
To answer your first part question, it was when I was doing, I wanted to do my English honors in my undergraduation. but my parents were more focused on saying you must do commerce, that has more, it will have, career-wise it will be better than just doing arts. But I was so lost in commerce, then thereafter my parents said do anything. So I did my masters in English and I also did my post-graduation in journalism. But when I was doing my masters in English, all the magazines had a poetry column, poetry page, 2 pages. Illustrated Weekly of India would dedicate 2 pages to poetry. Youth Times, the Mindaji here used to write so often for the Youth Times. There was a poetry, 2 pages of poetry. The junior statesman called J.S. Slater would publish poetry. There was the Sun magazine which was publishing poetry. Veer Sanghvi was editing imprint who had to be my school, fellow mate, and they were publishing poems. So Femina was publishing poems. So there was a lot of opportunity to try and send you a poem. I'm not saying that my first poems got published immediately. There were a lot of rejections. But my first poem, which I felt very intensely about, was at the age of 22. And that was written 46 years ago. And somehow I found it in my collection, which is a part of this. It's called I Forget, I Forgive. Now, it was when I was doing my master's, when it was Mark Twain who once said, by the time a man is 21, he has fallen in and out of love 100 times. So, for one of my classmates, I had but she was already, sort of going steady with someone else who was like TDH, tall, dark and handsome, and I knew I had no chance. But she was a good friend of mine. She would share things with her. She was not sure whether she would continue the relationship. Now the guy was actually a Casanova kind of a person, and I kept warning her that stay away from him, and it was like a Hindi movie, Love Triangle actually. But finally she said that I'm not going steady with him, and last night I went with him there, I went in there. So I was very upset. For a week I didn't go to my class. And in that week I think I wrote this poem, I Forget, I Forgive. And I'm telling in the poem that this guy is going to reject you, but doesn't matter. When he rejects you, I'm still there. So you are just another insect being led by his crafty charm into his intricate web of affluence, of deceit, of lust. Don't tell me I didn't warn you. With a soul in womb and with the badge of infamy, when repulsed, ask not for cyanide, my love, just ask for my shoulder to weep on, my love. It was around this time that when this poem got published in the Youth Times, selected by Shiv K. Kumar. So my professor, I was in Raipur, I used to go to coffee house every day. Some of my professors, young professors, Bengalis would come, and Majumdar said, Jax, I saw your poem here in Youth Times today, damn good. So I said, where? So he said, I asked the news vendor there, when will this edition come of Youth Times? Bola tomorrow. But Majumdar said, I had seen it in Bhilai. Now Bhilai is 22 kilometers away from Raipur. So I was so excited that I took my scooter and drove down all the way to Bhilai. In the night, 7:38, I went to the magazine shop on the railway station and picked up a couple of copies and came home. That was exciting. I couldn't wait till the next day. That is the thrill of seeing your work, especially a poem in a magazine. Sorry, what was your second point?
The pattern which emerges, the life journey of the persona,
Yeah.
though you begin with my...
So, okay. Now, thanks for listening. Yeah, my epitaph, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you, is not a death poem. My epitaph here is that at the end of life, I am feeling I have not achieved much. Ladies and gentlemen, all of you are actually writing your own epitaphs of what you've achieved, what you've done. That is your epitaph. It's not a death poem. But I'm using the symbol of a tombstone, I'm using a symbol of what is written on an epitaph. There are death poems in my volume, quite a few of them, and some disturbing, but my epitaph is not a death poem, And in this also, you will see the refrain is usage of lines. In contemporary poetry, one of the literary devices used very often is the refrain, using it again. In I forget, I forgive, I repeat in the end, my love, my love. Here it is on a cold hard stone. Because a tombstone is cold and hard, it symbolizes that life is going to be tough, life is going to be hard. So you're preparing for that, and sometimes in the end you wonder, what did I do? You know, I always get that feeling, have I done enough? What have I done? So on a cold, hard stone have I engraved my own epitaph. Here lies a one who thought he would do something in life. All he did was to write his own epitaph. Then there's a pause, again, on a cold, hard stone. The repetition of that. If I remove the last line on a cold, hard stone, the poem has no meaning. Which is what I'm trying to say is that in contemporary poetry writing, such literary devices, we might not be writing in iambic pentameter. We might not be rhyming our poems. But there has to be a basic rhythm. There has to be some literary devices like the paradox, the symbolism, the imagery, all this has to be there. So I would not say that my epitaph is it's in the beginning, yes, it's there, but it's not a death poem. Death poems comes in the end, but yeah.
It's the pattern that emerges between these two ends. So already, I think you, in the beginning, you did talk about the publishers, but what I wish to tell to the audience what I felt about this publishers, the feel of this book is so good. After a lot of the technology and all, you get to get a real feel of the book in your hand. And it reminds me of some religious books which preempts the serious topic which is going to come. And I think I saw at my grandparents' place those religious books which are bound in cloth, but though they were not that brightly colored. And also the use of the calligraphy pen, all of it makes it so special. But you did answer in the beginning about if you would like to say something more about the publishers.
Yeah, publishers I just mentioned, I think, that Writers Workshop, Professor Lal, and I was very happy when just a few days ago when I sent them my newspaper cuttings, he sent me 2-line Professor Ananda Lal. He's written in 2 lines that it's because of poets like you that we publishing houses can publish them, which is a big thing, I think. So they are very keen that I should send my second collection of poems to them. And it's a far greater honor to get your poems published by Writers Workshop rather than maybe Rupa paperbacks or something.
In some of your poems, I found that the persona is all-powerful, in control, ready to curate his own pain and suffering, and doesn't even want God to interfere in their life. But in other poems, you seem to submit before life's sufferings, you're almost like a victim, as you write in the dark book, that you feel trapped and immobilized by pure, unalloyed pain. So this oscillation between these two kinds of pulls, opposing pulls, it does find expression in one of the poems, Untitled, to which I thought Tiger Man would be the perfect title, because there you say that half of you is strong like the tiger, but the other half is like the suffering human being. So this oscillation between and this dichotomy, which I think most of us do face in life at times, we do feel we have the energy and the power to do everything. So what do you have to say about this dichotomy? And also in spiritual terms, can we see this as God's way to subdue the pride and arrogance in human beings? Maybe.
Yeah, so you touched upon 3-4 points. One is about this, curating my own pain. Someone in my last session asked a very nice question where you say that I would know that I would one day, God is. There is this line where I found in King Lear, where he says, that God is swatting us like flies. You know, we are like flies in His hand. Isko maar do, isko utha lo, isko bimar kar do, isko cancer kar do. What is this? And we are saying we are like in the hands of God. So it is a kind of thing that I know I am going to. It is also a Christian thing of that. It was not only Jesus Christ who bore the cross. Each one of us have to bear our own cross. Each one of us have to bear that kind of suffering which will come in our life. But I am telling God that I will not allow you to swat us like flies whenever you want. We would like to curate our own pain, and we will decide when we would like to get crucified. But at the same time, this poem is, someone very smartly asked me in my last session, which is also true, that how can you decide your own pain and your own suffering? So my answer to them was that this poem actually reflects, we may not be able to decide when I'm going to suffer, when I'm going to be crucified, but my reaction to suffering, my reaction to pain, my reaction to grief, that is in my hands. How am I going to react? So you find different people reacting differently to different stressful situations. Similarly, trapped, there's a poem which you rightly mentioned that sometimes you feel that I'm like a dartboard, People are throwing darts at me and I'm immobilized, I can't do anything. So that's the situation which has been stressed in that. And you mentioned tiger. Tiger, there's a juxtaposition between a human being. Last time, Suhash Ahuja, a well-known actor and a poet himself, who had come to discuss with me, had also said that you are underplaying the human being, You were talking about moth-eaten spirits in that poem. The tiger is splendorous, See, the best part about poetry as a genre is that we can take license. A novelist cannot take license, a playwright cannot take a license. Similarly, essay writer, prose writer cannot take a license. But a poet can. I can imagine myself, in this poem I'm imagining myself as a half tiger and a half human being. Where the human is like, beaten up with moth-eaten spirit and the tiger is splendorous. So some of my wildlife lovers in Ranthambore like this poem,
Your poems elicit these kind of questions that life poses to each one of us, a lot of paradoxes, dualities and ironies which confuses one about the real meaning of life. So I found that in your poetry you use a lot of paradoxes. For instance, in Topsy-Turvy, turning oneself upside down brings clarity about your own life. You write somewhere in that. And again, in how to withstand pain, you prescribe that one needs to just meet pain head on and immerse oneself in the crucible of suffering and breathe in agony in order to purge oneself of that pain. So this is the kind of paradox you keep talking about. So how do you feel that poetry brings in this feeling of catharsis and emotional purgation for a poet and as a person?
I'm glad you talked about the paradoxes or the contradictions in my poems. Last time it was pointed out by someone that even in one poem I might contradict myself, or there is a paradox in which is very true. I would like to quote lines of Walt Whitman from his famous poem Song to Myself. Do I contradict myself? Yes, I do. I am large, I contain multitudes. This is Walt Whitman. So there can be contradictions in poetry, of course. Mr. Ahuja was comparing moderating last time and asked me the two poems opposing each other, Cacophony of Silence and what is it?
This is
The Rust of Routine. They are contradicting each other. So what? In different times I have written a different poem. They might convey messages which might be paradoxical, But that can be happened. I'm very glad that you talked about my poem, How to Withstand Pain. So one of the reviewers rang me up, and she written a very good review, mind you. She rang me up. Now, how is it, Jags, that you are such a happy-go-lucky person, laughing, partying, enjoying life, and you've written these kind of poems? There's not a single poem of joy and glee in this anthology. How do you justify this? So I just told her that there may not be a poem of joy or glee, as you were saying, but there is a poem on how to bear suffering, how to withstand suffering. How to Withstand Pain was published in the Illustrated Weekly, selected by Mr. Maseko, one of the biggest Indo-Indian poets. And so, in this poem, what you are saying is that, it's a poem which I am imagining, like, if you are going through a problem, you are going through suffering, you say, what will I do? Before I pray, I have to take a bath. I take a shower, rub myself with a rough dry towel, and go and pray. And I say, I go and pray to the pantheon of gods I have known. And for India, I don't know how many gods we have. And ultimately, nothing is going to happen. They might tell you what everyone tells, that time is a great healer. Wait and you will feel good. But my thing is, why can't we meet pain head on? Let's meet pain head on and enter the very crucible of suffering and come out cleansed, pure like gold. That poem got huge traction, and in a lot of portals also I got good appreciation. So it was actually not contradicting. I'm giving my view that withstanding pain is best to face it, rather than praying. If someone has passed away in your family, any amount of praying is not going to help. If someone is suffering from a terminal disease, no amount of praying is going to help. So that is my thing, that you have to face pain and suffering head on.
Actually, this was regarding paradoxes in your poetry, and also I forgot to mention subterfuge of time. With a very childlike, innocent manner, you want to sneak away from time in order to capture meaning in time. So you want to get at the root of the meaning of life amidst all its vicissitudes. So that is the urge which I found.
So, subterfuge of time is, where I imagine that we all pray to time. And somehow if I can manage to get out of this time and space hustle, maybe then I would be able to be in control of things. So I'm just imagining myself that if I could subterfuge, by use the word, if I could fool time and get away from that, that is that.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let me take to another of the arena of his poems, because this has a wide range. So, you talk about real life historical legends like Savai Jai Singh Second, and literary legends like Sylvia Plath, Hemingway, you mentioned T.S. Eliot, and also characters from plays of Shakespeare like Hamlet. So, and the way you present is so interesting, because you are in conversation with them, transposing past into present. So, this kind of a shift which you can create in your poem, that's a real marvel. So, what inspired you to write about these figures and characters?
The publisher was very happy to see that I have written poems on personas. I have written a poem on Hamlet. I have written a poem on Hemingway, who is my favorite author. I have written a poem on the death of Sylvia Plath, who happens to be my favorite poet. She is a confessional poet. A lot of my poems are confessional. You don't hide your emotions. If you're writing confessional poetry, it's like why do we call it confessional poetry? Because a person goes to the church, to the priest to make a confession. These poems are confessional poetry. They don't hide anything from you. So, coming back later to Sylvia Plath's thing, why I wrote on these personas was these personas impacted me so much. Hemingway, if you ever get to know about his lifestyle, actually we never know when did he write. He was always having parties, boozing, lion hunting, fighting in the war, winning the award medal, and he could outdrink anyone in the tavern. His long luncheon parties, and he married 4 times, divorced all of them, probably last one was, and he had so many girlfriends. He was living life to the hilt. And then suddenly, and I'm not even talking about his writing, which was amazing, and he gets a Nobel Prize for his writing. And then suddenly he takes a shotgun and blows his brains out. So my point is saying, hey Hemingway, it's a conversational style to him. And you had everything going for you, Hemingway. You had I've written by mistake, married 3 times, so a lot of the critics say he married 4 times. I said, it doesn't matter, it doesn't change the context. And so I posted this poem on the Hemingway portal, which got something like over 300 comments, on the discussion. It started a controversy, it generated, the admin had to stop it. It created so much of, so these portals are very strong, and it's through these portals that poetry journals contact you, literary critics contact you, that can we use this poem in our journal, can we use it in our website. So this is the way. So similarly, Hamlet is a character which is amazing, absolutely, because there's no better character in any play which I find like Hamlet. So his Hamletian dilemma is that he just can't decide to be or not to be. Throughout, he just can't decide. So I'm just imagining, because I have the literary poetic license, that I can suddenly my spirit, Hamlet's spirit, Prince of Denmark, comes over Denmark and sees everything is fine, everything good. And then he sees a billboard which says, Nike, just do it. Now that rattles him. All this time he's saying to be or not to be, should I do this, should I do that? And he gets, he almost dies seeing this billboard. So what I've done is I've juxtaposed the Nike slogan, just do it, with Hamlet's dilemma of not being able to do anything. So that point, I think, very well brings out the juxtaposition about, and in the end, ladies and gentlemen, I was a corporate trainer, and first thing we would teach people in corporate training was that they could not take immediate decisions. You have to have a situation, you have to assess the pros and cons, you have to assess what the situation is, then you have to make a strategy, then you take decisions. That's how management works. And there is a sporting goods company, the biggest one in the world, which is saying just do it. But then there are, ladies and gentlemen, only marketing sports goods. So my poem ends with Hamlet saying, you guys don't have to deal with his mother's incest. You guys don't have to deal with murder. You guys don't have to deal with getting your friends killed, like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. You guys don't have to deal with rejecting the love of my life. So, but he said, anyway, next time maybe if I'm around, I will just try to do it. So recently someone rang me up from Delhi and he said that he's sent a copy of this poem to the Nike chairman. What's the reaction?
Out of 46 of your poems, I think 6 to 7 of your poems, like the birth of the verse, the scheduling of the poem, you're talking about the creative process and what goes on inside the poet's mind or the writer's mind, the creative process. And also at the same time, you take us into the mind of the poet and gives an insight into the creative struggle, the block, mentioned in the poem, the block. So, which is, I think, can be very frustrating as you write in the alluding poem. And again in the block, the white sheet, stares back at you, that you're not able to write anything. So this is the feeling of self-mockery. Maybe the poet feels a self-mockery and then tries to auto-suggest at the end that, so what if I'm not able to write today? So this is something very deep inside the poet's mind. So what do you have to say about this creative process as well as the block the writers go through?
Yeah, so first, a lot of my poems are on this intense struggle to write poetry. Now, there is this poem which is scheduling a poem. You can't schedule a poem. I can't say that on Sunday from 11 to 1 I'll write a poem. You can do that for a novel, you can do that for an article, you can do that for an essay. You can't do that for a poem. Poem will come by itself, you can't just make every week poem. Then there is the alluding poem, which is, so a lot of my birth of a verse, all these poems are, and I think my, by far the most impactful poem among the genre of writing poetry is on writing a poem. There's a poem of mine on writing a poem which says with apologies to T.S. Eliot, and it starts the way the wasteland starts of Eliot, and I'm invoking the muse. All the Greek writers would invoke the muse, the god of poetry before, and Eliot also does it in the beginning of the wasteland. So I'm trying to, start with invoking the muse, and it's in a light-hearted manner. It's not, and I go on to say that I will do this, I will write about this. And so I'm using puns about, there's a famous poem of Eliot where he says, women come and go, talking of Michelangelo, where the society women pretending to know Michelangelo. It's a famous poem of his, Love Song of J.April Frog. And similarly, from the wasteland I take some, there's a line, there is something rotten in the Ganges, it's like the wasteland. It's the thing I'm writing about that. But it is also about the struggle to write a poem. So, someone surprisingly asked me the other day, यार मेरे को भी कविता लिखनी है, मैंने कहा लिखो ना, बोलता है किस पे लिखूं? So I said, you'll have to think about it yourself. But this brings one point, that does a poem always have to mean? There's a very strong school which believe it's like art for the sake of art. You don't, each time a painting or a sculpture or a writing poem does not have to send a message, does not always have to instruct, does not always have to be didactic, moralize, and does not always have to mean. So my thing ends with the school belief that poem does not have to mean, it just has to be. So if you read this poem out loud and writing a poem, you love it. If it says, which has no meaning. I say, I am doing this, do this, but what about the theme of the poem? He says, I'm not sure what the theme is. So someone got very angry on reading, someone rang me up from Calcutta saying that you are making fun of T.S. Eliot. I said, no one can make fun of T.S. Eliot. As far as modern poetry is concerned, he's the one that matters. For me, the two poets who impacted me most is T.S. Eliot and Sylvia Plath. They both were opposite style of writing. And so I would like to recall, since you teach in the college, that Professor Rangana, who teaches the wasteland, Eliot, is about to start before you start teaching a piece of work, then they tell you about the life of the writer. So he was telling them about T.S. Eliot, and he said at the age of 60 plus he married his secretary, he was 20 plus. So the girls sitting in front of the class, they giggled. The professors of English are so dedicated to they worship their writers. They teach and they have read so well. So Professor Rangana, he was like, he read when these girls giggled. And he asked, are you laughing at Thomas Stearns Eliot? So The girls got scared and said, not at all. Alright, then it's okay. Because no one laughs at it. So this is what I told that person in Calcutta. No one, I repeat, no one can ever make fun of T.S. Eliot. There's no one bigger than him in modern poetry.
So talking about so many of the authors going through this anthology, I felt it has a range of styles and subject matters ranging from subjectivity of romantic poets to confessional poetry, and then on the other hand you have the modernistic tone where you write very objectively. We can find the metaphysical strain in your poetry. You use so many paradoxes and witty conceits, and also a feel of the Robert Browning in the way you begin some of your poems in a dramatic way, in almost abrupt beginnings and the colloquial style which you use. But yet I find that all of the poems, they are bound by one common strain, that is the uniqueness. So are we now being introduced to a new movement, that is Jagism movement in poetry? It's wonderful, very wonderful. It's, we are proud that we have a person from India who can create this kind of a trend. And how would you classify your poems? Because there is this wide range.
So, what the publisher was, firstly, thank you very much for I think there's no such thing as Jacksonism. But, there's a vein of which the publisher wrote to me that, throughout your poems, they're self-deprecating, you're making fun of yourself all the time. And even in the people have said were macabre poems like the Champur Crematorium, I think even there is humor there. If you can discern, if you can find it out, I think there's huge humor in it, So, the publisher found that there was this vein of, treating very serious, very somber subjects very lightly. Number two, the irony, the fact of irony in your poem. He said most of the Indian poets writing in English, the irony is missing. That you have a strong sense of irony. So these are the two things. And I think one of the professors had asked me in the last session that is it deliberate in all the poems the way? I don't think it's deliberate. I have not worked towards that. It might have been there.
Yes, you reminded me of things. Hello? So, I'm audible? So, what you are mentioning about this charcoal crematorium, even I noted that, and this is this tendency in your poems that you do juxtapose the commonplace, maybe with something very serious, to bring out the irony, like cremation of your parents because it is very near to your place. So, something very serious and then you with the practical dealings in life. So this is the reality of life and you bring it out in such a deep way, which I really loved it.
Yeah.
And moving on, would you like to say something on that?
Yeah, I would like to say something about confessional poetry. I would just like to say that you mentioned something about confessional poetry, and I also mentioned that Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, other such confessional poets, T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound, they were contemporary poets, and Ezra Pound had a huge impact on Eliot, and then Eliot, their writing was classicist style. If you read out The Wasteland loudly in the dead of the night, if I have nothing better to do with Kushwant used to write, he always keep the Wasteland on his bedside. If he couldn't sleep, he would read out Wasteland. If you read out loud, you might not understand the poem. I'm saying might not understand not because there's something wrong in you, but each poem of his has an allusion. To understand the Wasteland or to understand any of Ezra Pound's poetry, in just one poem of Wasteland, there is the Upanishad, there is the Gita, there is the Greek mythology, there is the New Testament, there is the Old Testament. Ladies and gentlemen, can you imagine that the most famous poem of American literature, The Wasteland, ends with Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. It also has Chinese philosophy in it. So, to understand wasteland, I have to get illusion. I must understand what the illusions are. Only then I will be able to understand the poem. So, what happened with confessional poetry was that Sylvia Plath in Sexton said nonsense. We are going to write what we feel like. And we are going to write our inner demons. We are going to write about our personal problems. We are going to write about the inner love problems. Most famous poem of Sylvia Plath is called Daddy. She was suffering from Electra complex and it's a love and hate relationship with her father. She's writing about her, she committed suicide at the age of 30. Psychological problems that she's facing. Her contemporary Anne Sexton had no subject was taboo for them. No subject. One of them has used the word excreta in a love poem or poem. And Anne Sexton has written a poem, Menstruation at the age of 40. But if you told, they were the classicist writers, if you told Eliot and Pound and others were horrified by this new confessional style of poetry. But the confessional style of poetry, why I like is that it is true. Hemingway said, I would give anything for one line of honest writing. So this is honest writing. Confessional poets, they're writing honestly. They're writing about their true inner feelings.
So you mentioned that you have been writing since the age of 22.
Yeah.
And so how do you see yourself growing as a poet?
Ladies and gentlemen, you will be surprised what I have written in the two lockdowns. The last poem published in this was written in 2019. What I have written in 2020 and 21 is mind-blowing absolutely, and I sent a sampler to my publisher. I sent him a poem which is entitled Stephen Dedalus. Stephen Dedalus is the protagonist of a James Joyce novel called A Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. Stephen Dedalus also comes in his famous book, The Ulysses, where he is not the main protagonist, he is doing the role of a Telemachus there. So, when Professor Lal saw this poem, Stephen Dedalus, he says, I am waiting for your next collection of poems, send them fast, So I think I have written my most mature poetry because we got the time. We started reflecting more about life and death. I got COVID. And I've written a lot of pandemic-related poems also. But let me tell you that for anyone who's aspiring to write poetry, they're not young people here. But if there are, it is hard work. A poem is not like it just comes and you write, and if you can do that, it's a great thing. It needs revision. Each of my poems in this anthology have been revised a minimum of 100 times. There's a poem called Holocaust Survivor, which according to Writers' Workshop is my best poem. They used it as a teaser to promote my book. They put it on their website. For each poem, they use one poem on their website. They used Holocaust Survivor. I just read a book on the Auschwitz, and it moved me so much that I wrote this book. Now this had something like 11 stanzas, but I kept tuning it, kept revising it. Read it out loud, and you will feel like revising it. And finally it came down to 2.5 stanzas. So, Holocaust Survivor is an objective poem, it's not subjective. You read a poem.
So I was about to ask you about your, what have you been writing lately and your future plans, so I think...
So in the future plans, of course, we should come out not only with the collection of poetry, but also a novella that I've been working on. It's a love story based in Indonesia. So let's see how it figures out.
Hopefully, yes. So ladies and gentlemen, this slim book carries great weight, and that is the weight of life's paradoxes and ironies, clothed sometimes in dry humor, and it talks about love and its loss and all the topsy-turvies. It's a real marvel unto itself, and I think when I read them, the poignancy of the poems made me feel of an analogy that they are like a spark. Just like a spark can burn the whole forest, so the intensity of some of the poem is so piercing. The smaller the poem, the more poignant it is. So it would be great if for the audience you could read some of your favorite, if we have time.
I will read out one poem and then we will open to the audience for questions. And I will read out my poem. It's on for Sylvia Plath. It's on the suicide of Sylvia Plath.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you'll be surprised that only recently someone told me that Anne Sexton, who was a contemporary of Sylvia Plath, had also written a poem on the death of Sylvia Plath. So I searched for the Anne Sexton's poem and I found it, and I put both the poems on the Facebook. And I also put both my poem on the death of Sylvia Plath and that of the famous poetess Anne Sexton on the death of Sylvia Plath on the portal of Sylvia Plath as well as on my Facebook. And I was quite humbled when some of them said mine was better. Well, later to tell you that Anne Sexton also committed suicide after a few months after Sylvia Plath. So you might have heard about the famous poem The Mirror of Sylvia Plath. I start from her 3 lines from that poem, and it's an extract from her thing. In me she has drowned a young girl, and in me an old woman rises toward her day after day like a terrible fish. This is a extract from her. So from these 2 lines I have developed this poem. This is on her death. And I am talking to Sylvia Plath. You learnt early, life only dissolves and dissolves, like a series of promises. And what remains are a few odd syllables. You learnt early, it's a little cornucopia of shattered splendor in a broken cut glass bowl. In fact, you laughed at it like a woman gone mad. You learnt early that the spirit in us is the spirit of blackness, that the silence in us is the silence of astounded souls. Sylvia, but you said you had friends, the cool odors of flowers and trees, the twinkling light of the stars. And remember you said you could converse so well, so easily with the skies. I can't believe you could have advised. She has written one of her poems, touch life and it won't shrink like an iron ball. So I'm asking her, how could you write, she's wanting to live, touch life and it won't shrink like an iron ball. So I write, I can't believe you could have advised, touch life and it won't shrink like an eyeball. So why did you shrink? Why did you lose the fight against the terrible fish? Thank you very much. Please feel free to, can radio someone pass the mic? And please introduce yourself before asking a question. That will be nice for the rest of the audience.
And not like a normal man who just goes out, works and then lives for his family. How do you see it as a poet, the life, rather than what a normal man sees life as?
So I think, like most writers, a poet has a better depth of understanding how life is unfolding. You can understand the situation, I think, in terms of even bearing the problems, or bearing the pain, bearing the suffering, all that. I think a poet can bear better than an ordinary person would do. So the important thing in writing poetry is you must read a lot of poetry. A lot of people come and ask me, I want to write, have you read poems? Read a lot of poems and it will certainly give you. Writing contemporary or modern poetry, because you don't have to rhyme, because you don't have to follow pentameters, does not mean that you don't have to follow a rhythm. You have to follow the basic rhythm, which comes out with reading out your poetry. Use literary devices like refrains, images, strong symbols. So I think a poet has a better sense of understanding a situation than a normal person would.
The sensibility also is
Yeah,
very
the
fine.
poetic sensibility, so to say. Yeah, Sunny, nice to see you.
Yeah, good evening.
Yeah, it's on.
I'm Sunny Sebastian. It was a very serious discussion, quite revealing also. And also he explained the processes which made you to write the poems. So first about the title. I didn't like the title. Because Professor Hassan is sitting here. Where is he? Let's go. Professor Hassan's book. Another book is coming, and that book is having the title I Am Nobody. The first proposed publisher of the book ran away because she said, I can't publish such a book. This is nonsense. Who will read your Nobody book now? So Professor Hassan also had written one poem, Epitaph. And I said, we can't make it that title of the book. I have, this feeling was so negative on you. But you are saying that it's not about death and all, it's not final, and you are coming out with more books, fantastic. So, gentlemen and ladies, this, I have known him for 35 years perhaps.
Yeah.
I came in 84.
Yeah, you know.
And I never took him this seriously, He was a fantastic PR person. Of course, started with Harshvardhanji, then he became himself PR. He is a management guru, but then he is a PR guru also. Our party, our trips outside Jaipur and all, the kind of supervision he had over booze and all sort of things. So now he is writing poetry. And also, I thought he wanted to shock people, that kind of thing. But I think now he is serious, and of course, very provoking poems. I have seen the book myself, but I have seen some of the poems, read it elsewhere and all. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunny. It means a lot to me.
Shall we?
Good evening, everyone. This is Shabi. I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit on what you said when you used the analogy of half man, half tiger, saying that poetry allows you the freedom to imagine which other forms of writing you may not. I do understand that poetry does have that sense of fluidity, which perhaps other forms of writing may lack, but if you just elaborate a little further, please.
Yeah, so, I will just tell you there's a poem in this called The Marathas Why Jaising too. A lot of poets have written city poems. Carl Sandburg, the famous American poet, wrote a series of Chicago poems. The most famous poem of Pritish Nandi is on Calcutta, entitled Calcutta Don't Exile Me. So all these poets were writing about. So when you're talking about a poet, it can take a license. I'm talking about, in the year 2000, I'm standing below the statue circle, and there is a municipal drive going on, pakode wale ko hatao, chai wale ko hatao and all. So I just look at the statue. It's in 2000 I wrote this poem. I look at this standing in a chaste white podium, Makana marble standing, oblivious. I use the word Orwellian, thing that he does not know what is happening to his city. I said, it's just as well, O astronomer prince, it's just as well that you stand in this chaste white, canopy and never step down to take a stroll around. For if you do, you will have realized the insensitivity of the citizens of Jaipur. It's actually not a poem about Raja Swai Singh too. It's a poem about us, about the citizens of Jaipur. What a mess we made of our city. That is the poem about. Coming back to your, if you read the poem William Blake's Tiger, it's the most famous poem about how he projects a tiger as the most splendid, most majestic thing. So here I am saying that as a human being has suddenly developed half into human being, half into tiger. The human being is tired, and they use the term with moth-eaten spirits, whereas the tiger is walking majestic splendor. So it's just an imagination. Yeah, like you talked about fluidity. Yes, because a poet can imagine, he can play around with, playing around with words. Ezra Pound even could put music in his words, without playing the music, could put music in the words. So the poets have license. You can compound a word. Just to give you one example, a contemporary poet can compound 5 words together, and even that is acceptable now. So there are a lot of things. So it does bring out more fluidity in poetry than in any other genre.
I thought of reading that poem because the juxtaposition of tiger and man.
Why don't you read it?
It's a
So
beautiful.
after reading this out, please stay back for a cup of tea, and there are books available at the back if anyone would like to pick it up.
So, I'd like to read this poem which is titled Untitled, but while going through the entirety of it, I thought that Tiger Man is an appropriate title to it. So, there he says that the other day, or rather the other night, I had a weird dream that I was part tiger and part man. The head and shoulders were those of a tiger, majestic in its splendor. The rest was that of a man, a sorrowful specimen with moth-eaten spirit, struggling to survive. So this anticlimax type of thing which is there in most of this poem, I really touched.
So there is a lot of big poems, small poems, and there are a few small poems which have been immensely liked by the young people. The college students bring me up and say, what are you doing? There's a poem I've written, there are you and I poems, I've written in a rare, magnanimous mood. I asked, take anything you want. You took my sanity. So these are the kind of poems I write.
So if we are liking, we are liking.
So, I think we now come to the conclusion of this evening, but before that, you would like to give it up?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Dr. Cheena Puri for a wonderful session. You did a great job, and thank you very much for asking the questions. And we are, shortly organizing JKK now as a book club. We are shortly now organizing on contemporary English poetry a session. Vivana, where we have invited her to attend, and some other poets who are writing in English are welcome to join. We will inform you about them. Please do have a cup of tea. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here, and thanks to you, Jack, once again. Thanks to you, Dr. Puri. And I'd also like to bring on record our thanks to the royal family for allowing us to use this hall. Thank you. Please join me.